To understand the American war in Vietnam, one must first understand Vietnam itself. For centuries, this S-shaped land in Southeast Asia fought for its identity against powerful neighbors, most notably China. This long history forged a deep and resilient sense of nationalism, a fierce desire for independence. In the mid-19th century, France colonized Vietnam, along with its neighbors Laos and Cambodia. For nearly 100 years, the French exploited Vietnam's resources, like rubber and rice. This colonial rule was brutal and met with constant resistance from the Vietnamese people. Many nationalist movements rose and fell, but one leader would emerge who would change the course of his nation's history forever: Ho Chi Minh. He was a committed nationalist and a communist who saw Marxism-Leninism as the most effective tool for achieving Vietnam's liberation. During World War II, Japan invaded and occupied Vietnam, temporarily displacing the French. Seizing this opportunity, Ho Chi Minh founded a nationalist coalition called the Viet Minh. With support from the United States, the Viet Minh waged a successful guerrilla war against the Japanese occupiers. When Japan surrendered in 1945, Ho Chi Minh stood in Hanoi and declared the birth of an independent nation. The French, unwilling to let go of their valuable colony, returned to reassert their control, sparking the First Indochina War. The decisive moment came in 1954 at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, where Viet Minh forces achieved a stunning victory. The resulting Geneva Accords temporarily divided Vietnam at the 17th parallel, pending a nationwide election in 1956. The United States did not stumble into Vietnam by accident. Its involvement was the result of Cold War anxieties. American leaders were gripped by the fear of communism's expansion. They subscribed to the domino theory. This idea held that if one country fell to communism, its neighbors would inevitably topple one by one, like dominoes. Vietnam became the critical domino in Southeast Asia. If South Vietnam fell to Ho Chi Minh's communists, then Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and perhaps even India and Japan would follow. The planned 1956 reunification election was a major concern for Washington, as Ho Chi Minh would likely win overwhelmingly. Instead of allowing the election to proceed, the United States threw its support behind Ngo Dinh Diem to lead South Vietnam. America provided his regime with financial aid, military equipment, and political advisors. However, Diem proved to be a problematic ally. He was a Catholic leading a predominantly Buddhist country, and his government was corrupt and brutally repressive. His policies drove many discontented Southerners into the arms of the Communists, forming the National Liberation Front, or NLF. Backed by North Vietnam, the Viet Cong began a guerrilla campaign, assassinating village officials and attacking army outposts. Under Presidents Eisenhower and Kennedy, the number of American military advisors steadily grew, inching the nation closer to war. The year 1964 marked the point of no return. In August, an incident occurred in the Gulf of Tonkin that would change everything. North Vietnamese torpedo boats allegedly launched an unprovoked attack on 2 U.S. destroyers, though the second attack was highly questionable. Despite confusion and lack of evidence, the Johnson administration presented the events as clear aggression, requesting broad military authority. The resulting Gulf of Tonkin resolution passed almost unanimously, giving the president a blank check to use military force in Southeast Asia. In March 1965, President Johnson authorized the first U.S. ground combat troops to Vietnam. The American troop presence swelled to over 180,000 by year's end. America was now at war. Johnson launched Operation Rolling Thunder, a sustained and massive bombing campaign against North Vietnam. The goal was to destroy the North's industrial base and force Hanoi to the negotiating table. However, the bombing did not break their will. Instead, it hardened their resolve and strengthened anti-American sentiment. By late 1967, officials painted a picture of steady progress, claiming there was light at the end of the tunnel. Troop levels had climbed to nearly 500,000, and relentless bombing continued. It seemed American might was grinding down the enemy. This official optimism was violently torn open on January 30, 1968, during the Vietnamese New Year holiday known as Tet. 80,000 North Vietnamese and Viet Cong soldiers launched assaults on more than 100 cities and towns across South Vietnam. They attacked provincial capitals, military bases, and even the US Embassy in Saigon. Militarily, the Tet Offensive was a disastrous failure for the Communists. They suffered catastrophic losses and failed to hold any cities. Yet psychologically and politically, it was a stunning victory for North Vietnam. The scale and audacity shattered the official narrative of American success. Johnson declared a bombing halt and announced he would not seek re-election. Tet had broken the will of the American political establishment. After Nixon won the presidency in 1968 on a promise of peace with honor, the war entered a new phase. His strategy was Vietnamization, gradually withdraw US troops while building up the South Vietnamese military to stand on its own. However, fighting remained brutal. The Battle of Hamburger Hill symbolized the seeming pointlessness of the war. Meanwhile, Nixon authorized secret bombing of neutral Cambodia, followed by ground invasion in 1970. The Cambodia invasion sparked the most intense wave of campus protests in American history, shutting down hundreds of universities. The turmoil reached tragic climax at Kent State, where National Guardsmen killed 4 student demonstrators, illustrating deep divisions in American society. Secret peace talks in Paris between Kissinger and North Vietnamese diplomat Le Duc Tho were long and filled with distrust. To pressure Hanoi, Nixon ordered the Christmas bombing, an 11-day onslaught to force a final agreement. Finally, in January 1973, the Paris Peace Accords were signed, officially ending the war for the United States. The last American combat troops left Vietnam 2 months later. However, the peace was fragile, leaving hundreds of thousands of North Vietnamese soldiers in place. In early 1975, North Vietnam launched a final offensive. The ARVN, plagued by corruption and low morale, collapsed with stunning speed. On April 30, 1975, North Vietnamese tanks crashed through the gates of the presidential palace in Saigon. The war was over. The lasting image was the frantic helicopter evacuation from the embassy roof, a humiliating end to America's longest war. For Vietnam, the cost was staggering. An estimated 2 million Vietnamese civilians and over 1 million soldiers lost their lives. The landscape was ravaged by bombing and chemical defoliants like Agent Orange, causing health problems and birth defects that persist today. The United States paid heavily too. More than 58,000 Americans were killed and over 300,000 wounded. Returning soldiers did not receive heroes' welcomes, often met with indifference or hostility, symbols of an unpopular war. The war shattered the Cold War consensus, creating deep skepticism toward government known as the Vietnam Syndrome. The lessons are numerous and complex: the power of nationalism, limits of military power, and the importance of questioning official narratives. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial stands as a silent testament to that cost.